Hello. I just realized I want to put my headphones on. So please forgive me. Hi, Karen. You just caught me in the middle of putting my headphones in because I forgot to do it before I started my live. So welcome. As I've been seeing faces and names pop up, and it's lovely to see all of you and each of you. Hi. Again, if at any time you can't hear me, just tell me, I can holler. And as always, anyone here, I always really appreciate your shares, your insights, your personal stories, your questions, all of those pieces. I really welcome them. So please feel free to join in the conversation. And your hearts. I always appreciate your hearts. Although they usually sort of overwhelm me and I get off topic. So again, welcome, welcome. And as I said, there will be tea in honor of Adam Quiney, who always drinks tea during his lives. Thanks, Karen. So this came up as one of my tangents in a previous live. And I realized I wanted to speak to it really directly. And a couple of reasons why I really want to talk about this piece around feeling our longing. And as I often do in these lives, there are some topics that feel like they flow very easily between like men and women, or the masculine and the feminine. And then some of them really come from my own lived experience as a woman and what I'm really hearing from women. And so this is one of those topics where I have no doubt that there is a corollary for men, and I am not hearing about it much. So again, if you're a man and you're listening, please feel free to share your experience. I'm going to talk about it a lot from the perspective of a woman, both because that is my own experience, and then also this is a piece that I actually hear a lot about from women. And so I want to speak to that experience. And this piece around feeling our longing, and especially this longing like for love, for partnership, like wanting a partner, wanting, for some women, this is very specific, right? It's like, I want to be married, or I want a partner who's going to be the father of my child, or I want someone to love me. I don't want to be alone. And what I would say is both that this is often a very uncomfortable feeling, like that we have them at all. And this one's very human, for sure. I see this, but that this feeling of like, oh, I want to be loved is uncomfortable, because it's sort of, in some ways it automatically, we're all loved. I'm pretty much guarantee you're on this Facebook Live, like someone loves you. But whether we have kind of the intimate partnership or relationships that we really want or not, for most of us, in the moments when we're like, but I want to be loved, it touches on some part of us that feels like we're not. Again, whether we're actually in, like I'm so in love with my boyfriend, and he just surprises me literally daily these days with showing me that he loves me in some way, where I'm like, oh, he loves me. And still, there are moments where I'm like, oh, why am I not loved as much as I want? And that it's just kind of chronic, if you will. I feel like this is just like part of the human condition. And those moments, or extended moments, when we feel that, I want to say just in one thread of it, there's a desire to not feel that, because it's kind of an ache. Like it's a little bit of an uncomfortable or painful feeling to feel like, I want love. It touches on the part of us that feels like we don't have it. and that it's painful. Again, I'm sure there's a corollary for men in this. What I hear from women a lot these days is that there's an additional piece, which is like, I shouldn't want that. I know I don't need a man, so I should get rid of this feeling. This feeling means that I don't know that I'm whole and complete to myself, or this is not feminist of me, or I should find a way to fulfill this on my own. Like there's an extra thing that gets put on that's like, I don't want to feel this longing for love because it means something about who I am as a whole and autonomous woman. So I'm going to pause for just a minute because I've also seen a lot of people join. I see a lot of faces I recognize. It's wonderful to have you all here. Thank you. And again, I love the conversation. So questions, comments, all of these, very, very welcome. And I'll try to engage as much as I can. Hi, Marcia. I saw you hop on. Karen said, love does not show up the way I expect it to, which makes me feel unloved or unlovable. And then it sounds like you can also, yeah, right, when you stop and notice, I see how profound and present it is. So that's, yes. Number one, absolutely yes. And that's like this whole other piece that I can touch on maybe later. But again, you know, some of us are going to have a story that's easy to back up with data. Like, I haven't been in a relationship for 5 years. Clearly, I'm not loved. And some of us are going to be married or partnered. So we don't have like the data, but just our love languages are like, meow, or who knows why, right? Like our childhood, there's some reason or some way where it'll happen. It just will. It'll happen. I don't know a human that doesn't have this feeling sometimes. So I want to really touch on when we do feel it, and even beyond things like you're talking about, Karen, which are really true, which are ways to stop and really notice the ways that we are really loved, but is the willingness just to feel the longing, whether it's met or not. And I really want to talk about, actually, when I'm talking about feeling this longing, I really mean without moving towards either getting the longing met or fixing that I feel it. Like they're both, I actually want to say, like, the fixing that I feel it that's like the essential piece, right? This is uncomfortable to feel, either just because it's kind of a painful ache, or it makes me feel like I'm not, you know, a good enough feminist, strong, competent woman in the world. For whatever reason, it's painful to feel the longing. And the typical ways that I see, especially women, really move away from this are to either squash it down by like, I don't need a man, I'm whole and complete, but you don't need a man and you are whole and complete. But there's like, I'm doing that, I'm kind of exaggerating the attitude because that's how it often will come across. It's like this pushing away. And it's really, in my experience, it seems like it's usually trying to push away the feeling of longing, is why that response is so intense. Is like, I don't want to feel that longing. Or to try to meet the longing, to get in a relationship, to get approval, to sleep with somebody, but they're actually both, those are both symptoms of the same piece, which is, I don't want to feel this longing. Stephanie said, for me, I don't know if it's longing for love or a longing for connection. For the purposes of this video, I would say they're the same. But it's love, we could call it intimacy, connection, but it's this space in between that there is a longing. Frankly, I believe that the depth of that longing actually comes from our longing for communion with what I call the divine. And that's why what I said at the beginning about this way that it's actually never completely met is like, it is and it isn't. But there's not a human who can fill that. Not even, I believe actually it's not even ourselves. This is sort of one of the myths, right, of like the modern women, is that, well, I should be able to fill myself up. Frankly, I don't think we're ever filled. This larger kind of cosmic longing for connection with all that is, intimacy with life, that's so much bigger than any human can meet. So sort of back to this original piece, which is basically, I believe that all of us will feel this at some point, and then it's whether we are willing to sit in that feeling or not. And that means neither kind of push it away and pretend I don't actually have it, right? Like, I know I'm a whole and complete woman. I know how to self-care. I have plenty of friends, whatever, however we kind of push away, but that comes from a place of like, I don't want to feel this longing. Or like, oh, well, I'll get in a relationship with you. I'll be a serial monogamist. I'll pretend that I'm into polyamory. Which is not to say, again, that some people aren't actually into, but there's this like, I'll just do whatever it takes so that I can be not alone. And it comes from the same thing of, I don't want to feel this longing. I've been really sitting with, and I've been a little afraid, frankly, to make this video, because one of the reasons that I want to talk about the importance of it is that I believe that it's actually, what are the words I want to use here? So many of the deeply unfulfilling, all the way to downright dangerous situations that I see women choose, I'm going to use that word, actually come from an unwillingness to feel the longing. So I'm going to make a very, very clear distinction here, which is that if a person mistreats you, that's on them. However, it's worth taking a look at, how did I get into this situation? So I've heard the stories of, I've listened to women who come to me as clients or in my programs. I have friends, I've watched it in myself. Like, I've seen enough women share stories in which they say something to the effect of, well, I knew it was a bad idea, but I didn't really trust him, but I had heard da-da-da-da-da, but, and then frankly end up in circumstances, like, again, what another person does is fully on them, whether that's, just a sort of a yucky dishonoring all the way to something that is downright violating. That's on them. It's never your fault if someone acts like that. And this part of us that we disown or push away, that's just like, but I just want to be loved. And the unwillingness to feel that and to be able to sit like just with the actual burn that comes from that longing. Over and over, I see women then choosing to put themselves into relationships. Again, long-term relationships or one night, or less than a night anyway, relationships that are deeply unfulfilling all the way to downright like unsafe. And I believe that a big part of what has women make those choices comes from an unwillingness to feel this longing, that the longing itself is so uncomfortable that they go like, well, he's not that bad. Like, well, what he said wasn't that mean. Well, and so there's so many ways to sort of address what this is in our culture. And one of them is absolutely on the side of men relating to women. And one of them is absolutely on the side of women trusting themselves, setting clear boundaries. And then it's on again, I'm using men and women here, but it's humans and humans. But in this particular dynamic, a lot of times it's then men honoring boundaries. So add the yes, and there's also this piece that often the fear is, if I say no to this, I'll lose everything, and then I'll have to feel the longing. If I don't go home with this man, I'll be alone tonight, and then I'll have to feel the longing. If I set a boundary with this partner, he'll leave me, and then I'll have to feel the longing. And so while yes, there are many, many pieces to be addressed in this dynamic, I believe that one of the very deep pieces that needs to be addressed is actually, how do we cultivate the capacity to be with our longing and the ache of longing for love or longing for connection, longing for intimacy, sometimes even to the tangible, like longing to be touched. Which, again, on the one hand, I would say absolutely the longing to be touched, or the longing for intimacy, the longing for love, these are human longings. And it's okay to want them. It's okay to want them to be fulfilled. This is not the place to go on the one side like, well, I guess I don't need that, or I'll find some other way to fill myself up, or, to push away, again, so you don't have to feel the longing. But even in that sense of like, God, I'm just longing to be touched, like, can you stay and burn in the depth of that longing and not try to fulfill it with schmo over here who, frankly, all the way from like just doesn't even really feel your longing to be touched because he doesn't know how to touch you and you didn't like him in the first place, to choosing to spend time with someone that is actually unsafe or might violate your boundaries. And it is, I do not want, I do not pretend to say that this is easy. It's not easy. It is a deep, deep, deep work to be willing to sit with ourselves in the depth of our longing. Kelly said, agreed, not only an unwillingness, but an unknowing. The way that I read that is, I would say first is the awareness that that's even what's happening. So it could be an unknowing, like, I don't even know that I'm avoiding my longing. So again, part of the reason I wanted to talk about this, first of all, is even to bring the awareness, like, oh, what is this thing, this feeling of longing? And for many of us, again, whether it has to do with longing or some other uncomfortable emotional or just experience of being, often we've created habits to turn away from or fulfill, right? Some way of not feeling that. We created those habits a long time ago. We created them young. We created them, frankly, masterfully. So it is true that the first thing that will happen is probably you'll catch yourself like, oh, I did a thing. If I just slowly walk it back, I think that was that longing thing there. And then slowly we'll get more to like, oh, I'm feeling the longing. This is that moment. And then the other piece I read there, Kelly, is not knowing how to do that. So a piece that I would say about that is that probably there is incredible nuance in like, so how do we do this? Okay, so fine. So I have longing. I can feel longing. How do I sit with the longing? Many, many different ways and many, many nuances for individual people. But like some of the overarching pieces I would give is, one is stillness practice. A stillness practice is fundamentally a practice of being with ourselves no matter what we feel. And that cultivates the capacity. First, it cultivates an awareness to even like, oh, well, what am I feeling? And then it cultivates a capacity to not have like these habit, not feel that, fulfill it. These are the two classic ways I see of people not feeling, which is push it away or fulfill it. But they're both about not feeling. And then the other that I would say is like an expressive practice. It's getting in touch with those feelings and then finding ways like, to feel it and like express it, which isn't talk it out. Not to say that talking doesn't have value, but what I mean by expression is actually literally feeling and moving it through the body. So those would be two ways that I would talk about. But I think your point is correct, which is it's not necessarily a conscious like, no, I see that I have a longing and I will not feel it, but that it's not knowing how, that it not having developed the capacity, maybe not even knowing that it is possible, but then not having developed the capacity. So I'll just welcome those of you who have joined. And again, if you have comments from what you've heard or questions, I really welcome those in this last probably 5 or 10 minutes. And I do want to speak directly. So one of the reasons that I actually launched this program that I'm going to be teaching called the No Man Diet is specifically, again, I've led men through No Women diets as well, and there are absolutely corollaries, but I'm just seeing this piece so clearly for women right now, and wanting so much to give the tools of this actually to women specifically. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to offer the No Man Diet as a way of actually creating a container to hold women in service of actually feeling without pushing away and without fulfilling, both as seeing those both as ways of actually moving away from this feeling the longing, which is deep, sometimes painful ache. And it really does take practice. So I want to just check in and see if there are comments or questions here, and invite any of you who are here with me to add your voices to this conversation, and then just touch in on a last couple of points before I close. So wonderful. So as I said, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk about this is that it frankly occurs to me as one of the ways that women are putting themselves in frankly dangerous situations. And there are all these other tools around setting boundaries and around people listening to the boundaries that are set. And I do talk about those, and I will continue to talk about them. But I also really wanted to touch partly, it's an interesting piece here. It is, I believe that talking about this piece and giving tools around this piece is actually deeply empowering to women. That it does not negate the pieces of responsibility that the people who are engaging intimately, relationally, and sexually with women have. But so again, without negating that, but if we put all the attention on other people behaving better, I believe we actually deprive some of what's incredibly powerful for the human or the woman in really reclaiming her own, I call it sacred sovereignty, which is in one sense anyway, like this piece of the capacity to truly make one's own choices. Again, not one's own choices free of other people's judgments or persuasions or what have you, but also free to make her own decisions, free of her own habits. And this pushing away and this fulfilling of the feeling of longing is I believe this is a habit. This is a habit that we've developed to not feel this, and it deprives us of our capacity to make truly sovereign choices. When do I choose to be in my own company? When do I choose to be in the company of other women? When do I choose to be in the company of men, and with whom and how? And our capacity to actually make that choice from a deeply sovereign place, I believe, is dependent on our capacity to gain awareness of, and then capacity around our habit tendencies. Because true choice needs freedom from habit and compulsion and addiction. And this not feeling of the longing is also a compulsion. Like, I can't stay here. So I hope that made sense. I hope that was valuable. I'll hang out here for a minute or two to see if, just in this last bit, there's any last your own personal shares. More than welcome. Any questions that you have, both whether if I wasn't clear about something, or your own shares about your personal life, like, but how does this apply here? Or, disagreements. I love disagreements. So any of those things, more than welcome. I'd love to hear from you. And I welcome any of you who are watching either to, I'll post the link in the comments, but to check out the information about the No Man Diet, or if there's a woman in your life you think would be deeply served by that kind of a container and a process, please send her the information, and I would love to be able to support in that way. So thank you, those of you who are here live. And to any of you watching the replay, I absolutely welcome all your comments and shares in the comments as well. Hi, Wendy. Oh, you're so welcome. And I will absolutely come back and engage in the written format there as well. So, thank you, Kelly. You're welcome. It's wonderful to be with all of you, and I do really appreciate those of you who brought your voices into the conversation. Much love, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Ciao.